What a day it's been for dumps, as they call them. Dumps of hacked documents. We'll be talking officially in the show about one of them, that which concerns Germany, where a huge dump of hacked personal, some of it very personal, information has been leaked about the personal, private and sex lives of German politicians, journalists and other opinion formers. Who might be the culprit? Well, already, of course, the finger is being pointed at Russia. Though why that would be is not automatically clear to me, because of all the countries in the European Union, the one that is closest to Russia is Germany. And of all the European political leaders, the one that is closest to Russia is Angela Merkel. Indeed, she used to live in East Germany. And Germany is holding out against the criminalization and ostracism of both Russia and China. Why do I mention that? Because I talked about Huawei just a little while ago, and now Huawei and China are being blamed for the absolutely cataclysmic drop in Apple's profits and the wiping of billions of dollars off its share price. There are, of course, many other reasons, and we'll be canvassing those. Apple themselves have blamed President Trump's trade war with China, but also the fact that American and other publics simply don't have enough money to be continually updating their smartphones. But the dump that concerns me most came to my attention just an hour ago. Too late, alas, to persuade my producer to include it officially in the show. And it might have been too sensitive anyway, but now that I've got your attention, let me inform you that the Integrity Initiative called for my arrest and the arrest of other people like me. They did so in a document written before the Skripal events. But they predicted such an event or events and said that in the event of such an event or events, every Russian agent should be immediately arrested, not least their, quote, agents of influence, unquote. And which agents of influence did they quote? Yours truly. And a good friend of mine, Neil Clark, if he's listening, might want to call us up, because it seems it's been a narrow escape. We might actually have been arrested at the behest of a government-funded integrity initiative. The Temple of Integrity, no less. So-called because it occupies the building beautifully constructed by the man who designed the Waldorf Astoria in London's Temple District, which they occupy rent and rate free, at least in their accounts that they submit to the Foreign Office, which have also been dumped. There's no provision for rent or rates, so someone somewhere is a grace and favour landlord for the Integrity Initiative. Much more importantly than threatening to arrest people like me and Neil Clark, there's further evidence of a government-funded attempt to undermine the leader of the opposition in Parliament, the Right Honourable Jeremy Corbyn, PC MP, the leader of Her Majesty's loyal opposition, being undermined by an integrity initiative funded, well, by the government he's opposing. And indeed, the Queen requires him to oppose. Otherwise, we have no democratic system at all. The one thing that shocks me more than seeing my name in these papers is the fact that not a single journalist in Britain gives a toss, and not a single one of them will give a toss. None of them will report it. None of them will ask me for a comment. That is the Britain we're living in 2019. We're also alive, rejoice, rejoice, on Fat Cat Friday, the 4th of January, the day when some chief executive officers have earned already what an average worker will get paid in a year. I'm not making that up. A report by the High Pay Centre think tank and the Chartered Institute for Personnel and Development says that chief executives of FTSE 100 firms have an average pay packet of £3.9 million. That's approximately, give or take a penny or two, £1,000 per hour. The national living wage hourly rate for adults is £7.83 as opposed to 1,000. Peter Cheese, what a glorious name. The Big Cheese, chief executive of the CIPD, says the average pay has stagnated whilst top CEO reward has grown, despite overall slow economic growth and very variable business performances. Chief executives of leading UK companies are now paid 133 times more than the average worker. And that's a good time to remind you that the richest 8 people, that's 8 people in the whole world, have the same wealth as half of the whole world's population. That is to say, 3.6 billion people. Can I run that past you again? The richest 8 people in the world have the same wealth as half of the world's population. Now, it's well known to regular listeners, I'm a follower not of Marx, not of Lenin, but of Aristotle. Aristotle's view that the richest should be no more than 3 times richer than the poorest for the perfect equilibrium in society is something that I support. Not tomorrow or the day after, but that ought to be the direction of travel. That's what I say. What do you say? We'll be talking, as I said, about the Apple share and sales slump. Apple shares lost more than 9% of their value on Wall Street. In fact, Wall Street's having a bit of a nightmare after Donald Trump boasting about how well it was doing. The company admitted in its first revenue warning to investors since 2002 that it was being badly affected by weaker growth, especially in China. The old blame China ploy had a huge impact on all tech sector shares. The impact was blamed on the lack of sales of the new iPhone devices. I'm bewildered by how many iPhone devices are there? How many have you had? How many times have you changed your phone in the last 5 years? And did you really need to? Apple doesn't control the market anymore. Samsung, Huawei, and other Android devices are taking market shares, with Samsung taking 20 to 30% of the market. Apple now only controls just under 16% of the mobile phone market globally, takes handkerchief from pocket and dabs eye. Apple did expect the slump, but the stock market didn't and wiped out almost 10% of the value of their shares. Now, as the Northern regional editor of the Financial Times said on Twitter late last night, to Gregg's, you couldn't buy publicity like the publicity afforded to Gregg's vegan sausage roll. It is a remarkable thing that the humble sausage roll minus the sausage was such a dominant story over the last 48 hours, mainly down to Piers Morgan, who may or may not have been retained by Gregg's to create what was a stampede in sales of this new vegan sausage roll. Now, I went live in Camden High Street outside Gregg's on Thursday. I waited in a queue with thousands of people watching me online. A long queue, and most of them were in there to buy the vegan sausage roll. Alas, alack, by the time I got to the counter, they had sold out. So I settled for a steak bake instead, as you do when you're about to try for the first time a vegan sausage roll. I went to 2 other Greggs hoping to go live there, but they were sold out also, and I didn't want to try the patience of my audience. But I'm going to try again on Monday, so if you're interested in that, watch this space. Tried to get Piers Morgan on, but he's on holiday. I hope he's not stranded with Dan Wooten in that hotel in the Thai storm that we heard about in the news. Best wishes, Piers Morgan from Gregg's, because it was a remarkable thing. Now, I'm one of these guys that's quite happy to allow other people to eat what they want to eat, other people to dress as they wish to dress. But there's a remarkable capacity in this country to declare jihad against any new thing, anything off the beaten track. I'm not a vegetarian, still less a vegan, but I am beginning to lean that way because I keep seeing horrific videos of what happens in Britain's slaughterhouses, and I can't accept it. I'm not against killing animals to eat them, but I can't see animals being mistreated, maltreated. I can't see animals being tortured and then eat their meat with equanimity. Do you get me? So we'll be talking to the owner of Mr. Nice Pie. We couldn't get Gregg's. In fact, we couldn't get a lot of people tonight. I'm really angry about Andy MacDonald, the Labour shadow spokesperson for transport. He's got a wide open goal, failing grailing. I tried to interview him tonight about this story about the ferry, £14 million of taxpayers' money being given to a ferry company that doesn't have any ferry, doesn't have any boats, doesn't seem to have anything. But hey, they got £14 million of government money to prepare for a no-deal Brexit that might never happen. But they get to keep the 14 million. You would have thought that a Labour spokesperson would want to come on national radio, and my national and international audience is well known, I think. But no, that never happened, despite me asking at the very highest level of the Labour Party for him to come on. Angry? Moi? But instead we're talking to Tom Morgan, the owner of Mr. Nice Pie, who makes vegan pies. Is it vegan or vegan? You see, I was corrected by my producer, who is a master ex-BBC of received pronunciation, even though he's a Johnny Foreigner himself. He said it's vegan, not vegan. He actually corrected me during my little video that I do with social media before the show. And then I got to thinking if he was right. After all, it's not Las Vegas, it's Las Vegas. Is it vegan? Is it vegan? Do you care? Do you care? If you do, call me 0344 499 1000. Now, I'm sure you were already thinking about Fat Cat Friday. I told you earlier that this marks the day when CEOs of the FTSE 100 firms who earn an average of £3.9 million a year, i.e. £1,000 per hour, have already earned the same as you'll earn in the whole of the rest of this year. Here to talk about it is the celebrated economist, former government economist, Vicky Price. Vicky, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
I don't mean you're not a celebrity. You are also a celebrity. But I meant to say celebrated. Vicky, tell us, first of all, is this calculation accurate, and how can it be justified?
Oh, well, it's pretty accurate because the only question mark is whether, in fact, some of the bonuses that CEOs get, which are calculated on what is achieved during the sort of year that has just gone, is going to be the right one to include in those figures that we've just been hearing about. So, in other words,
it could be worse then.
It could be higher. It could be. Yeah. It could be absolutely. So there is a certain amount of uncertainty.
Maybe by the end of New Year's Day, some of them earned as much as the rest will earn in a year.
Yes. Something like that is entirely possible. Whether it's justified, I mean, that's an incredibly good question. I mean, firms, of course, will tell you that, of course, they are, because there is a shortage of good CEOs around, and it is an international market, and everyone is trying to get the best talent, and most firms compete internationally, the large firms at any rate, and therefore they need to pay top dollar for their people. But actually, you look at some of the data, some of the figures that these people are getting in disbelief, because quite lots of times we see that the companies that they have been on top of have not done particularly well. Or
right,
if they
yeah.
have,
I mean, they're not exactly being paid by results, are they?
Well, not always. Or if they are paid by results, they are paid for results that have come about through accident. For example, if you look at house builders in the UK and how they have done, I mean, they have been entirely benefiting from the fact that the government has spent so much money on help to buy, which has, of course, generated a lot of demand for homes, and the house builders have done incredibly well. You could then argue, is that anything to do with whether the CEO at the top is brilliant? And the answer most times is no. It's just government help that has done it. And should they be getting, through the contracts that they had negotiated years before that, there's astronomical figures that they seem to be getting. And what happens, of course, is that once they found out, if you like, in inverted commas, or once shareholders realize that that pay is perhaps not justified, they tend to lose their jobs, as we've seen.
It's self-perpetuating, really, isn't it? It's a bit like football wages. Once I'm earning, £200,000 a week, my teammate is in for £200,000 a week, and if he doesn't get it, he's not playing quite as well as he was previously. It's the same with top pay, isn't it? If chief executives are earning this kind of money, they'll go on earning it, and indeed the trend will be ever upwards.
The problem is with the way that boards are constituted and the way in which remuneration committees are put together. So what you see actually in the city in particular is that a number of people sit on a number of different boards. So they don't just sit on one board, they sit on other boards as well as non-executive directors. Some chief executives sit on other boards as well as non-executive directors. They each create jobs for their mates, basically, and the remuneration committees, which are quite often run by some hapless lady who has been given that job to do, mainly coming from sort of HR backgrounds, which is what generally is the case when women are finding themselves in that position. They are the ones who are forced, if you like, to give those huge handouts. In a number of cases, we know that they have done that against their wishes and then resigned, as happened in Barclays a few years ago. So that's the sort of environment we're in, that NEDs, non-executive directors, help each other. And very often, they're not completely on top of what's happening in the company anyway, since in a number of cases, the way that finances are run has become incredibly complicated.
Isn't this feeding the populist left and right, from Corbyn to, right-wing populism on the European mainland, that there's a 1% and then there's the rest, that there's a bubble in which some people live fantastically well, whilst outside that bubble it's very different?
Yes, in fact, what you see is that it's not the case just in the UK. It is, as you rightly suggested, also in a number of countries in Europe. And we are very surprised to find that it's places like Switzerland and Germany, which also pay quite a lot to their CEOs. We've always fondly imagined that those countries are perhaps slightly more restrained, and of course their unions are more involved, and there's labour representation on the boards and so on. But nevertheless, the CEOs still manage to get quite a large pay. And yes, that has led to huge resentment. And the real question is what happens with shareholders. They have become much more active, voting down some of those pay packages. In some cases, they still haven't achieved majority of voting it down, but they have expressed their concern, particularly large institutional shareholders. And you have seen that some of the top bosses give the money back sometimes, or even are forced to just give up their jobs. So it has become a lot more of an issue, and it needs to be sorted out. And I think it needs, in my view, much more government intervention to say, look, as a shareholder, you have as responsibility to look at the firm and make sure it survives in the long term. It's not just short-term benefits that you're looking for to remunerate your chief executive, who usually isn't going to be there for very long. It has to be long-term sustainability, and there has to be more regulation to ensure that that's what the company code, in fact, says.
You're too young to remember, Vicky, but a long time ago, someone talked about the unacceptable face of capitalism. This is a bit like that, isn't it? The unacceptable face of capitalism.
Well, it is. But as I said earlier, people say that it's globalization that's done it. It's the fact that, now you operate in so many different areas across the world, and therefore you need to have the type of acumen, if you like, and talent that is required for that. But frankly, if you look at what is required to run a national health trust, or it is required to run a big government department where there are billions of pounds of money that you're responsible for. And very often those billions are so significant for the lives of the people in the country you're operating in. I don't really see that there is anything great about those people at the top of organizations that justifies this huge differential that exists among people who run some of our public services and the companies.
Of course, if you had a proper progressive taxation system, you could mitigate this by taxing the richest people more. Instead, under successive governments, actually, we've been taxing them less.
Well, there have been periods when the top rate has been higher. As we know, it seems to be going up and down a little bit. But what you find is that even in places where the top rate is quite high, there are all sorts of ways in which tax advice can be given to make sure they don't pay so much. Or you think of different schemes like share option schemes, or the expectation that you stay in the firm and invest in it for the long term, and therefore you get exemptions of tax at some point in the future, or it goes into your pension later on. So yes, I think tax matters hugely. The problem is whether an individual country, without cooperating across with many other nations, can really make a big difference in that area.
Vicky, I'm grateful for your time. A very happy new year to you. Vicky Price, former government economist, talking about Fat Cat Friday, the day on which the richest chief executives in the country have already earned what you're going to have to work the next 51 weeks for. Sounds like a bubble to me. Hassan Diwan says, my workplace used to change my mobile every few months. Always used Android. Now that's in relation to the Apple item later. Can't vegan be pronounced as in Megan? Is there a link between vegetables and royalty? Happy New Year, George, says an anonymous texter. And John says, Happy Vegan New Year, George. Vegan sounds like American to me. I'm sticking with vegan, just as I say the Ukraine, rather than what some other people call it. My old friend in Ireland, Philza, says, I noticed Mrs. Gayatri Galloway correcting you very smartly by saying vegan casually yesterday when live after you said vegan a couple of times. She's such a sweet soul. Love her. Not as much as I do, Philza. Thank you very much for the compliment. John Locke says, how to pronounce vegan? It's vegan, not vegan, apparently. Yeah, I'm glad you added apparently. Graham in Amesbury says, George, as you're having an Elvis night whilst talking about Gregg's latest offering, will you be playing Viva Las Vegas? Or Viva Las Vegas. Graham, that's very clever. Your vegan coach says, yep, it's vegan. So it's your vegan coach. Yep, it's vegan. George, how do you kill a living being without mistreating them? Isn't killing them a quarter of what would be their natural lifespan mistreating them? I appreciate you talking about this subject, by the way. Well, you can humanely kill animals. You can do so swiftly, having allowed them a decent life before you do. I believe that to be true. Otherwise, I'd already be vegan or vegan. But the way in which animals are treated before they're killed and are treated in the abattoirs when they're killed is truly horrific. And as I say, it's begun to make me lean your way, coach. And Barry says they must be deaf. I don't know what he means. And David says, George, as you may know, I'm a fan, but what's this thing, promo the odious Piers Morgan? Just saying. Well, as I've said many times before, Piers Morgan is a friend of mine. I like Piers Morgan. You would have had to have been around when he was the editor of the Daily Mirror, one of Britain's great newspapers, campaigning against the Iraq War. You would have had to be around when Alistair Campbell and Tony Blair were on the warpath, not just against the enemy without, but the enemy within. And as I've said before, David, I don't let anybody else choose my friends. David Leviscont says, I love Russia and probably owe them much gratitude for my freedom, which I enjoy today. Maybe that's enough to arrest me too. May very well be, David. I mean, just because it was only me and Neil Clark mentioned in dispatches doesn't mean the arrests would have stopped at us. I can't believe I'm saying this. I can't believe this actually happened. I was almost 30 years a member of the British Parliament, 6 times elected. I present a national radio show, which has become something of a cult. I'm on TV and radio every day, and people are talking about arresting me as an agent of influence of Russia. Tony X says, stick with vegetarian. It's much easier to do and much easier to pronounce. That is true, Tony. Ray Spencer says, it's worth mentioning, George, that the corporate banking elite can donate to a political party in order to be represented favourably in any future deals or transactions. It seems the political setup is designed to serve the 1%. Quite so, and I was going to make the point, Ray, to Vicky Price, earlier, that of course there's the old revolving door ploy to take into account also, because the politicians and increasingly the chief officials in Whitehall, like the people who gave the £14 million to the non-existent ferry company down on the Channel coast, they retire early and pop up on the boards and as chief executives of the very companies they've been doling out public money to over previous years. Okay, I need your calls. I need to know what you think, especially if you disagree with me. If you're a woman caller, if you're a first-time caller, any caller, 0344 499 1000. That's the number to call. Let me do another couple of the written stuff, though. The Red Resistance says, presumably if Apple are struggling, then with them being an icon of capitalism, they should be dropping their prices. But strangely, they never seem to do that. They seem to like the market when it's on the up, but not so much when it's on the slump. How very well put. David Leviscont says, the Remain campaign has been relentless. We did not vote for a deal. We voted to leave. It's no longer a fight for Remain or leave. It is now a fight for democracy. We have already voted to leave the EU. Democracy equals leave. Remain equals no democracy. I'm sure next week at this time, God willing, we'll be talking about nothing but Brexit. Tony X, the protest board, says the new Apple device doesn't do any more than the old Apple device. Mobile phones are just Walkmans, cameras, film and video, computers and phones. There hasn't been a single innovation in phone tech for years, but people still buy the new model. That's absolutely correct, you know. In fact, I was noticing the other day how infrequently my phone rings. It's not because I'm unpopular, because my texts, emails, direct mails, and all the other things that come in on your phone increase exponentially. But very few people seem to do much talking on their phone anymore. And Mary Mo says, tonight on vegans and animal cruelty. I'm proud of you, George. Maybe you do meat eat, but at least you're considering with your conscience to make changes, and that makes a great change to an animal's life. Scouse Alarm, my old pal up there in Liverpool. Hard luck, Liverpool, last night, I must say. I thought it was a goal myself. The real reason Apple sales have slumped is nothing to do with China. It's because their prices have become utterly ridiculous. I say this as I tweet from my iPhone. And David says, I'm concerned about fracking, not the fracking of shale, but the fracking of people's minds. Never have I seen so much division amongst ourselves. This really is divide and rule. How many more nails are we going to watch be driven into the coffin of freedom? And V. Kopinga says, Crying in the Chapel is one of my favourite Elvis songs ever. I remember buying it, actually, for 6 shillings and 8 at Largs in the high street of Lochee. David says, cows are kept pregnant all of their lives to produce milk. As soon as they're no longer fertile, it's off to the slaughterhouse. And Graham Judd says, the biggest problem is CEO bonuses. They're tied to share price and dividends, So all profits go to shareholders and CEOs. And Hassan says, according to Wiktionary, there are 3 ways to pronounce vegan. The 2 you've outlined, and making the G like a J. So it would be vegan. Am I leaning towards vegan? I might be. Let's take our first call of the evening. Remember, the number is 0344 499 1000. Steve, the Kidney Kid in Waltham Abbey, has rung me. Steve, what's with the Kidney Kid?
Yeah, I'm a friend of James Well, and I come into the show, and
excellent. Any friend of James Well is a friend of mine.
Yeah.
Well, not quite any. There's that guy from Pimlico Plumbers. He's not.
No. James, he's done a lot, and I helped him out with some stuff with his charity and that.
All right.
He's had a transplant and stuff, and I've always kept in contact with him.
Okay, I've got you. No, it just came up on my screen as Steve, the Kidney Kid.
Yeah.
What do you want to talk about, Stevie?
Yeah, I'm absolutely dumbfounded. And by the way, brilliant show, Mr. Galloway. I
Thank
love
you.
this on a Friday night.
Thank you.
'Cause, you go through the politics running up to this week and that. But today, I'm absolutely gobsmacked with this government about that. You know that we had the incident with the drone.
Yeah, the Gatwick drone that may never have been.
Yeah, well, it brought the army. In the end, it brought the army in to put this thing up, what stops the radar. Am I right?
Yeah.
And also, it stayed there, but none of our major airports have got this. And I've also found out in America, all their major airports have got it. And what shocked me even more, because of the terrorism, what we're getting in this country, I would have thought that'd been ages ago. And it's only £5 or £6 million to add this in each airport. And going on to the segment, what you've done today, we've given £6 million to a company that don't have a dredge or something.
14 million, if you don't mind.
Oh, 14 million. But whose portfolio, what minister would that have come under?
Transport.
Mr.
Same,
Galloway,
the
for that
transport, the same as the airport.
Yeah.
So we could have done 2 airports for the price of a non-existent ferry company, which had a credit rating of £5,000, less than me.
Yeah, but the government are there to protect us. If there was a terrorist incident, right, and God forbid, got knocked out the sky and killed them people, the government haven't done their job. They're not protecting the public.
Well, exactly. Now we know a terrorist didn't have to breach the security of the airport. They could have landed a drone on the fuel being pumped into an aircraft, and hey presto, you've done a Boeing 747.
Well, I am absolutely gobsmacked with this. What these government ministers and what they do, like, sorry, George, it's another incident that this week it was on about the people who go to these countries for arranged marriages and that, and it was in the paper that they have to pay for their expenses. Mr. Hunt was there and didn't even realise that that's normal practice, not with just people what are on arranged marriages. If you go to a stranded country and you have to be shipped back, like you air travel back, he didn't even know that, George, of his own department.
Well, we're ruled by less than Greek gods, that's for sure. And Jeremy Hunt, he said carefully, is definitely one of those. Steve, many thanks to you, and keep on keeping on with James Will. Buster Primrose says, vegan is pronounced like Reagan, as in Jack Reagan from the Sweeney. What about Ronald Reagan? What about Ronald Reagan? Or is it Ronald Reagan? You know what I'm saying, Buster? We could go on all night with this. Seems like we will. David Woolnough says, I'm sorry, George, but Marx forecast this inequality. Can you blame those who receive the surplus that way, Can you blame those who receive the surplus that we produce, making themselves obscenely rich? We need democratization of the enterprise to get rid of this inequality. Workers would not vote for it. Well, except they do. David says, are you still sticking with your prediction election announcement on the 31st of January? I am, until now, David. And Shirley Parnell says, I would reduce London area MPs to 25 and redistribute the other 50 to the Midlands and the North. Over 75 MPs for one city is not democratic. We've got far too many MPs anyway. We should have half as many MPs, being paid twice as much money, and given much more to actually recruit and maintain proper offices, a bit like they do in the United States. That would be better. Daniel is in Addleston and is always worth hearing. Daniel, welcome back.
Hi, good evening, George. How are you?
Yeah, good, sir. Good.
I hope you're all good. No, I wanted to talk about that Facebook thing because my understanding is there are the FANG stocks. You have Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google, these tech ones.
Yes.
And they're community worth, 1 million gazillion pounds.
Uh-huh.
But when you take away, sorry, I know I'm being vague here, people find this out for themselves, but when you take away their stock buybacks, and you understand what that is,
yes,
you basically can just ring up the central bank, say, put £1 million or £100 million in my account, and you use that to buy your own stock back.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, well, you take that away, and also Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, because they're utilities, they get government subsidies.
No, they're not utilities, and I don't know what government subsidy they get, do they?
Yeah, they do Facebook and that. They get some kind of bookie thing because they employ people. And like there was the thing with Amazon, wasn't it? When they
I'm pretty sure they don't get subsidies, Daniel. It's bad enough that they don't pay very much in tax.
No, tax, yeah. No, but like, for example, with Amazon, when they were setting up their second
that was in America. The cities and states were falling over themselves to throw money.
The government here, there and everywhere. But the point is, when you take away all of that stuff, what's artificially they're actually worth, it's worth nothing.
Well,
and then the question of, well...
Yeah, they don't actually produce anything.
No.
It's a blackboard on which you can write. Anybody can do it.
Yeah, well, you keep printing money. This goes back to all that quantitative easing. You can keep printing money and giving it to a certain group of people.
Yeah, but you're confusing things because the government isn't giving them money. It's them that are not giving the government the money they should be.
Right. Okay.
All right, Daniel. Thanks very much for the call. Archie says, we've had drones that don't exist, boats that don't exist. Does Brexit exist? Well, I'll be in a better position next Friday to talk to you about that, Archie, but thanks. Very interesting point. I mean, we had an aircraft carrier with no aircraft on it. We've now handed out £14 million to a company above a taxi office on the south coast, which was rated for credit purposes, worthy of credit of £5,000, is now £14 million richer. And who's investigating that? Why isn't that properly on the news being investigated? Why don't we all know now who the people behind that company are? And why didn't the Labour spokesman for transport come on this show to tell us? Angry, moi. Ali in Southwark says, what else could we expect when in our typical capitalist states policies assure that more resources flow to the rich than the poor? We live in a corporate welfare state with socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor. Our establishment and its MSM allies refuse to even diagnose the problem, let alone solve it. I cannot imagine Channel 5 or certain tabloid papers demonising wealthy scroungers, ripping off the poor every day. And my old friend Marie McFarlane says Apple iPhones have gone downhill since Steve Jobs died. His original design was unbeatable. However, his replacements have tampered with developments, which cut corners in a way Jobs never would, making them inferior. I still use the old design. Well, the old ones are often the best, Marie, as I'm testimony to. Don't tell the wife. She thinks I'm 46 now. But you might be right. Is it the demise of Steve Jobs that has led to this downturn of the Apple Corporation? Or are there limits, after all, to people's apparently insatiable desire for something new, even though the something new isn't that different from the something old? Ali says Arnold Schwarzenegger once stated, "Money doesn't make you happy. I now have $50 million, but I was just as happy when I had 48 million. Many people wish they can say that. Jimmy Durante was the best. I've been rich and I've been poor, he said. And believe me, rich is better. And the communicipalist says, besides wanting to lock dissidents up in stalags to protect our freedoms, the role of the Integrity Initiative of the Institute for Statecraft, the clue was in the name really, in cooperation with the Free University of Brussels, is as much about anti-Brexit as anti-Russian propaganda. I did think of that, my friend. I did think of what the main reason, what's the main problem they've got with me? Is it that I'm pro-Russian? Or is it that I'm pro-Brexit? Why should I appear on a list of people to get arrested? What have I done? Dennis Collins says, only one criticism, George. You are far too kind to the liar May, a proven fraud, incompetent Home Secretary, hopeless Prime Minister. May throws in a bit of racism when it suits her agenda. And David says, government and corporations are so far in each other's backsides that they forgot about the people. And when we revolt, they use militarized police to batter us with. Shocking. Well, I must say some of the footage out of France has been absolutely horrific. And it doesn't appear to be working. On New Year's Eve, the French state deployed 147,000 armed security on the streets of France to prevent New Year's Eve being hijacked by the Yellow Jackets, who wisely decided as a guerrilla outfit that you win if you don't lose, and so didn't show up for the fight. But as Andrew Neil, no friend of the Yellow Jackets, I don't imagine, tweeted just a couple of hours ago, they were all over the Côte d'Azur over the Christmas-New Year holidays, where he presumably was holidaying. And he spoke to some of them. They were very determined, he said, though determined on what was less clear. That's true. The Yellow Jackets are incoherent with no program, no real leaders. They're neither left nor right, but they are a mass of very determined people. And we'll be very lucky if we avoid the same kind of phenomenon here in the new year. And that luck will turn on what happens to the democratic decision that 17.4 million people made to leave the European Union. If they're cheated out of that in the next couple of weeks, you should expect trouble. And if I were you, I'd buy up a big stock of Yellow Jackets, because there might be a big sale coming up. I'm George Galloway. This is the mother of all talk shows. And on Talk Radio on a Friday, between 7 and 10, you'll find nothing else. 0344 499 1000. That's the number to call. You call us, we call you back, put you on the radio. Doesn't therefore cost you more than a penny or two. And if you disagree with me, your call is prioritised, as is your text, your emails and your tweets. So don't complain to Ofcom, though I know that only 8 people did, and 7 of those were quite probably from the Integrity Initiative. But hey, it's put me and us in a lot of trouble. So let me accentuate this point. I beseech opposing views to come hither. 0344 499 1000. Well, in the absence of a spokesman for Her Majesty's opposition, despite an entire day of trying to find one, I'm going to be the opposition, and not for the first time either. It is a national scandal that the government has paid £14 million unrefundable to a ferry company with no ferries to operate from a harbour which is inoperable. Ramsgate, inoperable, would need massive dredging operation. Even if the company had a ferry, the company has no address, only its lawyer's address. Its credit rating is £5,000. That is to say, if you were asked to lend them money, the credit reference company advises that you lend them no more than £5,000. We're giving them $14 million to operate a ferry service from Ramsgate to Ostend, except they have no ferries and Ramsgate is inoperable. Now, here's what we've managed to find out. I have some very clever people working for me. The average cost of a ferry is 1.5 to 3 million euros, much less than I imagined. So we've given them the price of half a dozen ferries so that they can then earn a fortune ferrying stuff across the channel. But if there is no-deal Brexit, they get to keep the money. Their terms and conditions turn out to have been taken from a food delivery service website, and some were taken from an online shopping boutique. The company's chief executive, Ben Sharp indeed, was reportedly managing director of Mercator, a chartering company that was forced into liquidation by Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs just 4 years ago, in 2014, with debts of almost £1.8 million. The firm, as I said, will provide ferry services as long as it manages to get its hands on some ferries, and from Ramsgate as long as it manages to dredge the harbour. They have no address. It's actually their lawyer's office. Seabourn's contract was one of 3 awarded to charter extra ferries to ease congestion if the UK fails to secure a withdrawal deal before leaving the European Union in March. The company says it is planning a service between Ramsgate and Ostend. Other firms are the French company Brittany and the Dutch company DFDS. Nice work for 2 EU countries there. A spokesman for Seabourn Freight later said, Seabourn Freight UK Limited, brackets SFL, is currently making preparations across its business for reintroducing the Ramsgate to Ostend ferry service and has been working on the project for the past 2 years. That work didn't include getting any actual ferries or dredging any actual harbours. Naturally, these preparations include ongoing updates to its pre-launch website, including terms and conditions, which were taken from a food delivery service and some from an online clothing boutique. This is not the script of The Revenge of the Pink Panther, by the way. This is not the old let's set up a non-existent ferry company ploy. This is entirely legitimate British government business. Now, who owns this company? What are their connections to Her Majesty's government? What are their connections to the Conservative Party? What are their connections to Conservative donors? What are their connections to Conservative MPs, ministers, ex-ministers? Any opposition worthy of its salt would be mining this story for all it was worth. But somebody called Andy MacDonald, who apparently speaks for the opposition on matters of transport, was given the offer of being here tonight to talk about it, but didn't. And I'm not sure even who he is. I'm not sure I've ever seen or heard him. And yet he's up against failing Grayling. What a duo Andy MacDonald, and failing Grayling. Where do you stand on this? I think it is a heap of stinking manure. I smell foul play. What about you? 0344 499 1000. That's the number to call me if you have a different point of view. Now, we contacted the following ferries to talk about this. P&O Ferries, DFDS, Brittany, who would speak to us next week as they're not able to talk about it yet. Irish Ferries, Condor Ferries, Pentland Ferries, Virgin Cruises, Stena Line. We even called Richard Branson. We were going to ask him, you're in space, you're in the health service, you're on the railways. How come you didn't bid for this £14 million grant? That's what it is. From the taxpayer, to buy yourself some ferries, to prepare for an as yet uncertain no Brexit deal. I'm telling you, I smell foul play, and I don't care who knows it. Let's hear from Ian in Cambridge. Go ahead, Ian.
Hi, George. I was wondering if you couldn't pass me on the address of the Minister for Transport that gave that £14 million, because
Chris Grayling, House of Commons, Westminster, London, SW1OAA.
That's great. I'll drop him a line. It just so happens I've been rummaging around in my attic, and I found about half a dozen model boats that I made teens many years ago, and I thought I could offer them to him for £1 million.
Yeah, well, exactly. If you were to photograph them from a certain angle, they'd be a rather more impressive fleet than Seabourn Limited are able to field.
Well, it might be good.
They have no ferries, Ian. How can you give 14 million quid unrefundable to a ferry company with no ferries?
The Minister of Docks, which is mad for short.
Yes, exactly. Well, a lot of people have been sending me tweets with Lego boats and little sailing boats and pedalos and so on, and all of them are more impressive marine resources and assets than are possessed by this company that just made off with 14 million quid, whose terms and conditions are actually taken off the internet from a fast food company.
Well, it may well be we need to investigate who the board of directors and the non-executive directors are.
Yeah. Well, I laid out my questions, somewhere. The questions that I was hoping the opposition spokesman would have asked tonight. What are the connections between this company and the Conservative Party and its members, its ministers and its ex-ministers, and above all, its donors? Because if it turns out that this company has anything to do with anyone who's a Conservative Party donor, I call for the arrest of those responsible.
Hear, hear.
On the prima facie case of corruption.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly, George, and I wish you all the best for this.
Thanks a lot, Ian. Happy New Year to you. Thanks very much indeed for that call. Ian has a little fleet of boats he made when he was a kid, which is rather more than Seabourn have. Ali in Southwark says, I'll not be surprised if our national papers blame Russia for the wealth inequality, with a headline like, not put in enough money into the world economy. This Russophobia is becoming something. And Denny says, perhaps the non-existent boat will be investigated by the non-existent squad that surely will investigate the non-existent Garden Bridge. Great show. Thanks, Denny. And GB Traveller 1963 said, I watched you in front of the US Senate again on YouTube today, George. I know why the powers that be don't ring for a chat, fella. Thank you very much indeed for that. Now, the next caller is not just a woman caller, but a first-time caller. She's doubly welcome. Melina, welcome.
Hello, George.
Nice to hear from you.
Fabulous show as ever. I'm a huge, huge fan of yours, George.
Thank you very much.
I'm ringing up to say that I think the government is having a laugh over this with this contract.
You've got to laugh or you cry, Melina.
Yes, my first point of thought would be is P&O ferries. They've got all the equipment now already. Why didn't they just approach P&O ferries?
Exactly. You wouldn't even have had to give them the 14 million to buy the boats.
No, because they've got all the equipment there ready. They've got all the staff there that they could possibly need and want, and they're qualified. They know what's what, everything.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that something else is going on behind the scenes that perhaps we don't know about, because it can't be right that the government just hands over all this money just like that without no ferries. I mean, it's ridiculous. If this was a private company like British Gas, British Telecom, or something like that, I've no doubt about it that these people would be facing criminal charges with the police. Right,
well, we wouldn't. It is a private company. It's a private company without an address. Private company who's
about the government.
Oh, the government. If they were a private company, yeah, you're right.
If they were spending all this money like what they do, if that was a private company, yeah, the finance directors would
they'd be on a charge. Yeah. By the way, so would those that run the EU. So the EU has never been successfully audited in 45 years.
How can it be right that the government spends our taxpayers' money like this? And I work so hard every single day for little money that I get, and they waste my money, which they get in my taxes. But yet, if I was to even do a tiny, tiny little thing of what the government does, I would be in prison by now.
Yeah.
The police will be coming along, knocking on my door. How can they spend all our money? It's not just my money, your money, everybody's money, like this. And the police, they don't come knocking on their door at 10 Downing Street or whoever authorises these ridiculous contracts. Why aren't the police investigating?
That's a very good question, Melina. I think that this now should be reported to the Metropolitan Police. Yes.
I think the police, they need to look into this, because like I said a minute ago, P&O ferries. Why the government should have gone to P&O ferries and paid them the money.
We've given 14 million to a phantom boat company.
Yeah.
Who's going to pay the price for this?
It's us taxpayers, yet again, who always lose out. And yet the police, they turn a blind eye to all of this nonsense that the government spend their money on.
Yeah, of course, the police are savagely reduced in their ability to fight crime by the same government that gave the phantom boat company the 14 million quid.
Well, tell the police to get away from 10 Downing Street, stop protecting them, and look after the rest of us.
We couldn't do that. We couldn't, Melina, because if the police left 10 Downing Street, I wouldn't like to warrant what would happen, because people are so angry in this country now. We simply have to protect the Prime Minister and the government. Listen, it's been great hearing from you. First-time caller, don't be a stranger. Come back soon. That was Melina, first-time caller and a woman caller. Hedy says, I never saw the appeal charging their customers till the pipsqueak. No wonder they're losing their core business. Another great mother of all stock shows tonight from Hedy and in-cider, capital C. Hedy, that's very clever. Philza says, come on, Gregg's official. Mr. George Galloway deserves your vegan sausage roll. Do you not know who he is? You better give him and his missus some on Monday. I want to stress, Philza, that I pay for all my sausage rolls, vegan or otherwise, and I wouldn't accept any largesse from Gregg's, though I'm pretty sure they must be paying Piers. Asif says, I completely agree with the consensus on the iPhone. The only innovation Apple have excelled in recently is ways to elevate their pricing. My iPhone 6 is over 4 years old, but thanks to 2 non-Apple high street battery replacements, it's working fine. I won't change my phone until I need to. Fantastic show. Asif. Thank you, Asif. Fletchy says, George, while I voted to leave the EU, I have over these past 2 years become increasingly fearful of the kind of Brexit managed by this morally bankrupt government. What sort of country will we become if Corbyn and Labour fail to win the election? Well, Fletch, will be the country that the people of the country vote for and can remove. Richard says, great listening, but disagree that Russian government is okay. People speak of peace in Europe. Who said the Russian government was okay, by the way? People speak of peace in Europe since World War II, but I think peace has only really existed since 1991, when Russian control ceased. I don't trust Russia, being of Polish heritage, but very British. And Helen Lakin says, you're on the hit list because you educate people. The regular media are not questioning this shipping fiasco as they follow the state's narrative. You question it and let your listeners know what is really going on. That is why they need to shut you down. Helen, chisel that on my gravestone, please, but after a long life. I talked earlier about the slump in the shares of Apple Corporation. Lost more than 9% of their value on Wall Street, which was a very high value and adds up to a very large sum of money. This after their first revenue warning to investors since 2002 that it was being badly affected by weaker growth. And that has had a huge impact on all tech sector shares. Takes handkerchief from pocket, dabs eye. David Wood is the chair of London Futurists and is a considerable expert in this field. David, welcome to the show.
My pleasure, George.
Now, Apple themselves blamed President Trump's trade war with China, but also the lack of money in people's pockets to upgrade their devices. Do you hold with those two pieces of, excuse to shareholders, or is there more to it in your view?
I think there's more things going on. The China angle is very interesting. Apple did very well in China for a long time, but the Chinese phone manufacturers have got larger and larger market shares, and Apple's being squeezed there.
Mm-hmm.
So companies that you and I probably hadn't heard of until recently, companies such as Vivo, which is a pretty new company, just created in 2009. By some counts, it's now the number 2 smartphone vendor in China, behind Huawei, which is a bit better known. There's other companies such as Oppo and Xiaomi, and in many ways, their products are better than Apple's. You can weigh these things up in all kinds of different ways, of course, but the Chinese home market loves these products.
You can hardly blame them. I mean, it's a patriotic thing to do. I wish British people bought more British products.
Yeah, indeed. China is having more of an impact on the world generally. You know, we here in Britain love to talk about Brexit this and Brexit that, and we should, but there are some big things going on in the wider world. And Chinese companies are catching up in many ways with Western giants. And they're probably going to have even more of an influence in the near future.
Let me digress for a minute, David, because I've got you as an expert on the line. The hysteria about Huawei, which I covered on here a couple of weeks ago, the arrest of the daughter of the founder, who is herself a senior executive in the company, all this propaganda about Huawei phones being spy devices and so on, as if all our phones weren't spy devices. Is this partly driven by fear of the rise of Chinese phone companies?
Well, you and I know, companies do spy on, countries do spy on each other.
The only companies not spying on me at the moment are Chinese. That's because I don't own any of their products.
Well, we don't know where all the Chinese chips are ending up. We might take home an innocent little bit of electronics and plug it in at home to do something like monitor the baby, see whether the baby's crying, or control the temperature in a bit more efficient way, but there might be a chip in that device which is easily hacked. These
are hypotheticals, but what I do know is that Facebook is selling my information to all comers. I do know that Amazon is. I do know that supermarkets are, and so on. That's what I kind of meant. Anyway, that's the China angle, Dave. What about the other reason that Apple gave, namely that people simply don't have the money to keep updating their devices, in which case, why put so much effort into continually bringing out new products?
Well, they've done very well for the last, 10 plus years. Every year in the last 10 years, people said, well, people are going to stop buying Apple phones because there's nothing new. But for most of that time, people did look quite eagerly at the new ones and said...
They were queuing up to buy them, yeah?
That's right. But it is now, there's less innovation in these new devices. And Apple somehow, like many great companies, seems to be a bit slower than it used to be. Middle age spread, whatever. Some of the things like fingerprint sensors to unlock your phone with your fingerprint or face recognition. Some of the latest AI, artificial intelligence assistance, is not quite as good on the Apple phones as maybe the other devices. Apple, therefore, has less of a reason for people to want to buy their devices as in the past. So, and people are hanging on to their old devices for longer, especially when it's possible to repair them. You know, it used to be that if your Apple phone battery was going bad, there's nothing you could do about it. You just had to buy a new Apple phone. Increasingly, there's outfits around that allow you to easily update your battery and get a new lease of life out of it. So Apple needs to be more innovative again, and what they might be able to do something which harks back to the earlier point about privacy. Apple might be able to establish itself as the most trustworthy company for looking after our personal data in the midst of all these other companies that we're not quite sure what they're doing. You know, Facebook's got this bad reputation, which you mentioned. Google, people wondering about it as well. It used to be their motto was don't be evil. Now it's don't be creepy. And we often feel, oh, that was creepy. How did people know this? And Apple have the possibility, perhaps, to come out
to market themselves as Mr. Integrity. Yeah, they are actually one of the better companies, I'm told, in that regard already. Now, the Huawei P20 Pro was hailed as what the next iPhone should have been. Is that true?
It's a great device. They put all kinds of good new features in it. Apple are no longer head and shoulders above the rest. It's like in the days when Nokia used to be head and shoulders above everybody else.
Yeah.
And eventually other people managed to create similar-looking phones. And so I'm not saying that Huawei's phone is absolutely better, but what I will say is Apple are no longer clearly distinctive, and there's no longer such a social pride to have the latest Apple phone either. It used to be that people would, they go to restaurants and they'd put their phones on the table and they'd all smile.
And people would ask you, which one is that, and so on. That doesn't. Well, familiarity breeds contempt in that sense.
Yeah.
They're no longer edgy, no longer cutting edge at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't write them off. After they did their last profit warning in 2002, they created all kinds of wonderful new iPods and then iPhones. I'm sure there's a lot they're working on. I think they're looking at the health market. And, we are all often doing unhealthy things. And if our phones or our watches could more reliably tell us, your blood pressure's really gone through the roof here, or your
Now,
blood
that would be a
sugar
good thing, yeah.
I think they could get there ahead of some of their competitors. And they have said in the past they have a possible future in mind when they get more of their revenues from healthcare services than from the iPhone device itself. And if that were true, it would be astonishing.
It would indeed. Now, finally, and I'm grateful for your time, David, one of my esteemed correspondents, Marie McFarlane, made the point that it's been going downhill since Steve Jobs died. Do you think there's anything in that?
I don't think that's entirely true. I think they've had a lot of pretty good devices in the last few years. I think Tim Cook has been an inspiring leader. And, of course, Apple wasn't just about Steve Cook. It was about people like Johnny Ives, the head of design. He's still there, and a whole bunch of other incredibly talented people who maybe don't get the limelight in the same way, but many of them are still very active. So I don't write them off. And great companies often go through downturns before the next upturn. If they could get the positioning right with privacy and a trustworthy and a high integrity company, they could soar again. Or if they get the healthcare right.
David Wood, Chair of London Futurists. Very, very grateful to you. You seem to die mid-sentence there, but thanks, David, very much indeed for that. Chris Morningstar says, if democracy is subverted, I'll be buying up a yellow jacket. I'm with the French Gilets jaunes and against the Tories and the Tory-enabling liberal democracy establishment against our working class brothers and sisters. I like to think of myself as a relatively stylish sort of guy, Chris. And I have tried on one of these yellow jackets. It's not easy to look good in them. I'm going for a different brand. If it comes here, can we not make it different? Can it maybe just a red ribbon tied around our upper arm? That might look quite cool. Peter says we should have given the 14 million to Ryanair for food drops. Peter in Glasgow. Sarah says, absolutely. What are the connections to the Tory party and the Ferry company? And Andy MacDonald MP, where are you? Good question. Chris Grayling is a vacuous sack of nonsense whose ineptitude knows no bounds. He should be put on a ferry and thrown overboard into the channel. Speaker Bird Crow. Well, Speaker, I don't hold with capital punishment, so I couldn't go all the way with you. But putting him on a ferry and sailing him round the world for the rest of his natural, maybe. Jane A. says maybe we should all be looking at the company directors that may supply these boats. GG. And David says, regarding the ferries, everything this incompetent government does no longer surprises me. They may as well have had a blank piece of paper for their manifesto. I wouldn't trust Theresa May to serve fish and chips, let alone the country. Paul Booker says, I think that the Seaburn ferries are possibly a subsidiary of the lesser-known company, DUP Ferries. That's the tweet of the night so far, Paul. Tommy says, good evening, Georgeski. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. I had one of those vegan sausage rolls. Look, is it vegan or is it vegan? You say tomato, I say tomato. Should we call this whole thing off? Should I give up the vegan sausage roll because I'm not calling it vegan? I had one of these vegan sausage rolls and it was fine, but I don't understand why they taste like meat. If I was a vegan, I'd want it to taste of vegetables. Live long and prosper. Is that vegan too? Tommy in Oxfordshire. Very good text, Tommy. I don't know. As the vegan ranks can only really come from people that previously ate meat, it's probably quite a good thing if the vegan product tastes a bit like meat, isn't it? Not more likely to tempt them over to the other side, as it were. Truth Today UK says, you know the song, someone's knocking on your door, someone's ringing the bell. May it be very soon a UK government. And here's my old friend Mohammed in Maidenhead. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Hello, George. Yes, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, my dear friend.
Thank you so much, my dear friend. It really means a lot, George. I'm really happy that you got me on the air tonight as well. So thank you.
No, the show would not be complete without you. You're on your way to becoming a legend.
Well, I hope I don't say anything that is wrong tonight. Thank you very much, George. I was going to talk about you mentioned earlier about the 8 wealthiest people accumulating the same wealth. I think you said as half the population.
Of half the people of the world, 3.6 billion.
Right. Well,
8 people own more wealth than 3.6 billion people.
Well, for those of us who are sort of complaining, I just wanted to sort of, take it from a different perspective tonight and just talk about it a little bit from a religious perspective. I'm a Muslim.
Yeah.
And I believe that, obviously, if the money is used for good causes, charitable causes, for good causes, great. However, it's important for us to remember that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, lived in extreme poverty, and he actually made a dua, he actually made supplication to Allah, asking to be raised with the poor. Now, wealth has a very corruptive nature sometimes. The trials and evil that may accompany it. Allah tells us in the Quran that Satan threatens you with poverty and bids you to conduct it unseeingly. Allah promises you his forgiveness and bounties, and he cares for all when he knows all things. So that's another point. Often a person's wealth can be a trial or a test for them as well. And we know this from the Quran as well, where Allah says, your riches and your children may be a trial, whereas Allah with him is the highest rewards. So fear Allah as much as you can. Listen and obey and spend in charity for the benefits of your own souls. And those saved from the covetousness covetousness of their own souls, they are the ones that achieve prosperity. And I just want to conclude by saying that when you think about on the day of judgment, if a person has a lot of money, think about having a lot of money for a second. If you've got a lot of money, you're going to be accountable for how you acquired it, how you spent it, and you'll be judged for whether or not you're grateful for it as well. So the more money you have, the more accountability, the more responsibility that wealth carries. A poor person cannot be asked how they acquired or spent the wealth they didn't possess in the first place. Also, just to finally, sorry, I know I said I was going to conclude, but I just wanted to conclude with one more point. If someone were to be equipped with wealth, they would transgress the boundaries of Allah's set in place. Allah tells us in the Quran, if Allah were to enlarge the provisions of his servants, they would indeed transgress beyond all bounds through the earth. But he sends down in due measure as he pleases, for he is with servants for he is with his servants well acquainted, watchful. So having money is not always good. It's good if you use it for charity, but I'm just trying to...
Yeah, but as the Bible says, Muhammad, it's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. Scott McGrady is a tech expert, and I mean an expert. And he's here to talk to us, not just about the dump of data from the lives of German politicians and journalists and all kinds of top people in Germany, which happened today. It's not really big news in Britain, of course, but it is the biggest news in Germany, which is not a small thing. But also, I'm going to ask him about the Integrity Initiative dump that named me today as someone who should be immediately arrested in the event of something like the Skripal affair happening again. Well, not least because I'm pretty angry about it. I'm looking at how these things are dumped, how they are hacked, how they are acquired in the first place. Now, there are things called leaks and there are things called hacks. And many of the things that are called hacked are in fact leaked. But because it reflects badly on the people in whose custody the information was that it was leaked, they often claim it was hacked. Thus, I know for certain, that the US Democrat DNC material that was published by Julian Assange and WikiLeaks was not hacked. It was leaked. I know that for a fact. I can't tell you how I know it, or I'd have to kill you. But I do know it for a fact. But on the other hand, there are plenty of hacks. And some people are better at it, apparently, than others. So who better to ask than the expert, Scott McGrady. Scott, welcome to the show.
Good evening, George.
Let's talk about the German one first, please.
Sure.
What has been put into the public domain, and who are the main suspects?
Oh, that's an interesting question about main suspects. Basically, the targets were German politicians. Now, every political party except from the far-right AfD was hit by so-called data breach. So contacts, private chats, financial data, and a few other documents were dumped in the public domain for one particular celebrity. And this includes celebrities as well, and TV personalities, radio people, journalists, et al. For one particular person, about 3.4 gig worth of data was dumped. And for a couple other people, they said some of the data was fake, which I find quite interesting. I don't quite know the full story there, but I'm sure we'll find out.
Well, if you dumped information about my private life, I'd probably claim it was fake too.
That's the claim. Yeah, the claim is it's some of it is fake, some of it isn't, and it's really up to the general public to decide or try and figure it out. But
of course, some of these things are a blind, aren't they, Scott? If you're releasing details of every political party except the AfD, you're inviting people to conclude that it must be somebody that likes the AfD that has done this.
Or alternatively, someone that wants to pin the blame on them. Perhaps also, I mean, what we've got to remember here is it's a far-right party, and the same could be said about a far-left party or someone at the fringes of the political spectrum. They could be quite a small party with very little data, or the way this hack has actually occurred, I think it's good that you brought this up. The way the hack has actually occurred is it's not a hack. When we think about a hack, we almost imagine an Ocean's 11 style, casino heist style, guys in hoodies and laptops hacking into banks. the way most of this data was intercepted or hijacked was by credential stuffing. So people stealing passwords for social media, for emails, and then from there, once you've got into the email account or the social media account, it's very easy to start unlocking other things. If you think, your email is a central point to unlock basically every service on the web, it's very easy for them to then go elsewhere. So when we're calling it hack, I'm personally not comfortable calling it that. It's more a breach of, data, absolutely, but it's based on a password hijack.
And from what you've seen, I appreciate you may not be entirely fluent in German. Is there any particularly succulent things we should know?
Not off the top of my head. Everything's always succulent when it comes out, but everything always has to be taken with a pinch of salt. We can't verify yet the integrity of the data, although it looks to be legitimate from some of the stuff that's been coming out. You obviously have to take it basically as it comes and let the investigative journalists do a wonderful job. They go away and find out whether it's real, whether it's fake.
Maybe in Germany, not here. Doesn't exist here anymore. Scott, I'll tell you why I asked you about the AFD, because it seems to me that the intention is to blame Russia for this. And indeed, Russia may well be to blame. Russia is accused of supporting the AFD because it is a disruptor of the German political system and on the up and against the establishment parties. That was my immediate thought when I saw the AFD weren't included in the dump of information. The Russians are blamed for everything, of course, now. It wasn't a white Christmas because Russia interfered in the climatic systems. Of that, I'm perfectly unsure. But the reality is there is cyber warfare going on, isn't there?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we're all kind of, it almost seems as if it's Hollywood style, but it's really not. This stuff happens on a day-to-day basis, from your small little hacks, like the other day there was a Chromecast hack that came about. The user apologised for it, but that could have been used by nation states or even just hacking groups with their own political agenda or their own financial agenda. I think what's really interesting about this particular hack with the German government, and again, I'm calling it a hack just as a shorthand, is that there seemed to be no financial incentive yet that we can determine. So it seemed to be more a point-scoring basis, or trying to put the finger on someone, or trying to pin the blame. And you're absolutely right. Russia always comes up as the number one person that everyone looks to because they have previous in this. They have done things like this in the past, and there's been numerous stories about it. But also, I mean, I don't want to sound like Trump here, but China have also done it. We've also done it. The US
We've done it. We've got a whole brigade, the 77th, who we boast. Hunt threatened the Russians with our cyber warfare potential. What could possibly go wrong with Jeremy Hunt in charge? The North Koreans were the number one target for accusation until comparatively recently. But as the political agenda has changed, we quite like the wee un now, the Kim, what's his name, Kim Jong-un. We quite like him now. So it's Putin that's to blame. But there is a financial incentive in the latest one, I'm sure you're across it, where an anonymous hacking group say that they're in possession of such devastating secret, hitherto secret, material about 9/11 that it could bring down the US government. But they're only going to release it in exchange for a very large sum of money paid in Bitcoin.
So this news story crossed my path a number of times the other day, and today again, from various sources saying, have you seen this yet? Do you know about it? Do you understand it? What's going on? Very, very interesting stuff. And you're absolutely right. Cyber warfare is the sort of thing that's happening day in, day out. We used to talk about domestic terrorism and foreign terrorism, thinking about guys with machine guns or guys with bombs. Now it's very much more guys with laptops. It's very.
I prefer that myself. It's less painful.
Yeah. Pretty much, don't count your chickens. A lot of the data that can be released is very painful, and they can certainly, we saw last year or the year before, the NHS stuff with the malware that hit there, the ransomware. That was pretty painful, and it could have caused a lot of damage if done successfully, if it was indeed an attack. So, on the face of it, it looks as if it's going to be quite an easy thing to deal with, but in reality, it's actually possibly a lot more devastating than domestic terrorism. Not that either is ideal, of course.
Far from. I'm going to have you on my shows regularly, Scott. You're a great, great explainer of things. Explain this to me. I was talking to a fellow earlier about Huawei phones, and no doubt these two things are connected. Huawei phones, Chinese phones in general, are on the up. They're seizing more and more market share in China. Shock, clue being in the name. And the Western governments don't like it. And so the hair is set running that Huawei is actually spyware. But then I pointed out to the fellow who was here earlier, David Wood, futurist, another Scotsman, by the way, who I made the point to him that all our phones are potential spyware. All our computers are potential spyware. Isn't that so?
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, I've yet to meet a tech guy or tech girl in my field that doesn't cover the microphones and the camera and the laptop with either tape, have manually disconnected it, or they've got one of those little slider panels.
Well, I thought, I was just actually saying to my friend before you came on, my wife, you know how your granny used to put a cover over the budgie's cage at night? When we get into bed, I'm not going any further with this, but when we get into bed, my wife puts a cover over the computer and switches the phones off, because she says that people could be watching us, could be listening to us. She's right then.
It sounds far-fetched, but yes, in reality, it's correct. If you think about, we're putting more and more smart technology into our homes that none of us really know how to understand. If you liken it to a car, it was only 25, 30 years ago, you could literally take that car apart, rebuild it pretty easily. Now, my car in particular, my car is quite an old car. It's still got about 18 different computers and chips and wires and God knows how much electronics behind the hood to make it run. So if you think about that in the context of a phone or a laptop or a PC or a nice big shiny iMac with the cameras built into the top, that's a listening and spying device right there. And I'm not saying that that's absolutely what's happening. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there of far better targets, i.e. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, for example, who tweeted about having an Amazon Alexa in her house, or an Echo, I should say. Now, that's quite interesting, obviously, for foreign actors or just people that are interested in what goes on in the Huckabee Sanders household. But to the general public, can you imagine if, we're even just the threat, even just the thought of someone listening to your conversations and listening to your private data, none of us really know how it all works. I mean, even myself, I know a lot about computers, I know a lot about the internet, I know a lot about how things run. But however, I couldn't disassemble an Amazon Alexa or assemble one from scratch from bare components, because there's just too much work and there's too many little tiny pieces. You liken that to something like a smartphone, there's really umpteen avenues where someone could theoretically break into that phone, remotely switch on the camera, remotely switch on the microphone. We saw certainly with the Snowden leaks that was absolutely possible, and it was being used by various governments. But again, it's all a question of how interesting are you to a particular person that wants to do that. A lot of this stuff is very difficult to pull off. So in the end of the day, it's more a...
I think I'm at least as interesting as Sarah Huckabee Sanders. So I'm going to encourage the wife to keep putting that hood over the computer at nights.
Do it, and then at least you don't feel silly if something happens. That's exactly my motto.
Scott, you're a star. A radio star is born. I'm going to get you a regular slot on here if you'll take it. Thanks a lot for that. Scott McGrady, tech expert, talking about the hacks, dumps, leaks. It's sometimes, as I say, not quite what it seems. If I did something injudicious, which I don't, then I'd probably say somebody else done it. Somebody else hacked my Twitter account, and it was them that put out that outrageous tweet that I'm now disavowing. And that happens. And people claim that they've been hacked when actually one of their own people has leaked the material, as in the DNC case that I talked about, which is a big part of the problem that Julian Assange currently faces. But sometimes there really, really is a hack. And as I said, we, the British, boast that we are extremely good at it. Now, Truth Today UK says, I've done that one. Truth Today. Charlie Faye Culross. Happy New Year, gorgeous. All the best for 2019 and keep up the good work. Your weekly lambasting of Westminster and her corrupt, murderous and inhumane governments, past and present, are a stimulus to the Scottish independence movement. Thanks, Charlie. Russell Davis says, is it down to the people to challenge the government these days? Is it true 150 lorries are doing a Dover test run? Well, I hope so. Ford says, this is why I don't trust this government. Their incompetence is mind-blowing. Can you imagine what Brexit will be like under this government? Hashtag failing grailing. Hashtag seaborne freight. And Lizzie says, Ramsgate is being dredged in preparation for a no-deal Brexit. Is the cost of that on top of the 14 million? Well, they say that they're going to dredge it, but I just saw a picture of one wee dredger that had been sailed over from the Netherlands. It'll take more than a wee Dutch dredger to get Ramsgate open for business, I tell you. Mal in Belfast says, interesting news yesterday that the Republic of Ireland created 4,500 jobs with 55 firms approved for investment last year as a direct benefit of Brexit. It seems some Brexit outcomes aren't so bad after all, and they can indeed bring new jobs and openings for everyone. Amen. Mal in Belfast. He didn't say the amen. I said it. Here's Sam in London. Go ahead, Sam.
How you doing, George?
Good, thanks.
No, I just wanted to talk about why I personally think the Apple stocks are going down.
Okay.
I think, first of all, a couple of reasons, but one main reason, back in late 2017, it came out that Apple was artificially slowing down older iPhones, and they weren't telling their customers. And when it was official and they admitted they were doing it, they said it was to preserve battery life, but they did it without giving the choice to the consumer.
When you say slowing down, Sam, what do you mean? That if you searched for something, it took longer to come up?
Basically, so people with older phones know this, where you try and use it, and so you click an app and it'll take a bit longer to come up.
Okay.
It might chug a bit. And what they did was they updated it after it was a certain number of months old, and it would underclock the CPU, which is basically like limit how fast the CPU, the processing unit would work. And when that came out, and the fact that they didn't tell you that they were doing it and they didn't give you the choice, it basically speaks to everyone who already said that built-in obsolescence is real.
Yeah.
And Apple practices it. And on top of that,
it's a normal part of capitalism.
Exactly, and the electronics industry they're not free from these practices. I'm a bit younger than you, but back in the day, if something broke, you took it to someone and they fixed it.
Fixed it, yeah. But you can't do that with these things, deliberately so.
Exactly. They're made to be disposable. And the thing is, when people bring up, people are replacing their batteries in iPhones, like the earlier caller, the reason is because Apple, in response to this, halved the cost of replacing batteries in order to compensate people who might have had to buy a new iPhone previously. So they've totally admitted this and apologized for it. And then they have other practices, and their technology also, in terms of quality, has dropped because they've been selling faulty keyboards, and they tell you that you're using it wrong, and then they fix it anyway, despite saying there was nothing wrong with the design.
We can't verify that, of course, Sam, but I have heard that said.
Well, I could verify it, but obviously I'm not given enough time to do so. But that's personally why I think people are waking up, and they want better service, and they want the right to repair their own products. And shout out to Lewis Rossman as well.
Well, Sam, thanks a lot. We're getting considerable experts on the show tonight, and I like that. I like people who know what they're talking about. Darren Thompson says, can you imagine the absolute Barney the opposition and the tabloid press would have made of what failing Grayling did? If this happened under a Labour Corbyn government, you'd hear no end of it. Fantastic show, George, as always. Thank you, Darren. John says, Perhaps funds for a marine company is a stealth investment for relaunching the Royal Yacht after Brexit. And Speaker for the Dead says Apple has 3 of their iPhone models which cost $1,000 or more, and they have priced themselves out of the market, especially since Android and others have models which are at least as good for much less. And Jason Lexit, CPB Morning Star, says Liz Webster, Lib Dem PPC for the Cotswolds, the Tories' partner in crime, now proudly fly the EU fanatics' flag of convenience, FBPE. The FBPE have gone into meltdown this week. Any connection with the Institute for Statecraft is entirely coincidental. Well, I block them on site, so I never know actually what they're saying. Here's John in Camden in London. Go ahead, John.
Good evening, George. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, my friend.
Right. Ferry debacle. This is beyond some kind of Whitehall farce. It's like an episode of The Thick of It.
Yeah, it is. It is. It totally is the thick of it. You're right.
I expect Malcolm Tucker to come blasting in the room swearing at any moment.
Yeah.
But
I'm feeling that way myself about it.
Yeah. But as someone who has been in politics all of his life, are decisions like this, does it have to go through the office of Grayling himself? Does he rubber stamp it?
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he has to sign. He would have to sign something that off. Yeah.
Him personally, not some minion down the line.
No, it's too much. It's too much money, and it's on too big a subject. The whole subject of preparations for a no-deal Brexit is the hottest political topic at Westminster. So the choice of 3 companies and the money that is to be given to them is undoubtedly something that he would personally have to sign off.
So is it either, we now come down to a choice of, is it either skullduggery, which you have alluded to today, or is it just weapons-grade incompetence from the man who is the worst politician in the history of politics?
Well, he's not called failing Grayling for nothing. I mean, he really has a track record of arriving late for everything, and everything he touches turns to the opposite of gold, except when, in this case, we're handing out rather a lot of gold to a company above a chip shop on the south coast.
With 66 quid in its company coffers, with no people who work for
I never knew that. £66, no employees, a £5,000 credit limit, terms and conditions taken off a fast food menu. You couldn't make this up, John. The thick of it isn't the half of it.
It's 66 quid in the company coffers of Seabourn Ferry. That's it, right? Nobody actually works for them, because they don't actually exist. The Ramsgate to Ostend Zeebrugge ferry line was abandoned after the Herald of Free Enterprise disaster.
That's right.
What
a bitter irony that is.
Yeah. Well, it was run by Townsend Torreson. It then got briefly taken over by a company called Red Funnel, because I used to run a route to Dunkirk. I've used it a couple of times. But Ramsgate, it's a little tiny seaside town like Warmington-on-Sea. It's real dad's army stuff there.
Yeah.
And they couldn't cope with fleets of articulated lorries going through. So Grayling has handed out £14 million, unrefundable £14 million, to a company that ostensibly doesn't exist. Now, say what we will about Margaret Thatcher, but she would have had his nuts on the fire for this. He's got to go, surely. 14 million quid.
Well, why's the opposition not got this as the top item on their...
Exactly.
Well, never mind Andy MacDonald. Why is Jeremy Corbyn not here talking about this? Why are the whole of the top opposition front bench not talking about nothing but this? They could have had a cabinet scalp by the end of the evening.
Yeah, really. This is a man, all right, it's a bit London-centric, but this is a man who promised to deliver Crossrail on time and under budget. 2 years over time and £2 billion and
overspent,
overspent.
It's unbelievable. I mean, and he's still holding down a job in the cabinet.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Chris Grayling, is that, as I said earlier on, is it just weapons-grade incompetence? Is he really that thick and stupid? Or is there something more here than meets the eye? Because if there is, as you said, I want these people arrested.
We should all, now, and I'll do it, we should all ask the Metropolitan Police to investigate what prima facie seems like a crime.
Yeah, this is if I was to, like, I don't know, if I was to go to my local council and say, I want to open a sports ground and I want to buy sports equipment, goalposts for a five-a-side pitch, and I go to a company that doesn't have any sports equipment to sell me, and I get money off my local council, I'm going to be nipped for that, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
So a government minister has handed out our money to a company that doesn't actually have any boats.
Doesn't have any boats, doesn't have any money, doesn't have any creditworthiness, has terms and conditions taken off a Chinese takeaway menu. You couldn't make this up.
It's just and as you say, the opposition Transperk's spokesman. Where's Jeremy Corbyn? Where's John McDonnell? Where's anybody from the Labour front bench? They should be hammering on the table about this. This is something, as you say.
I would have demanded the recall of Parliament on this.
Yeah, really. This is like I don't know. I can't seem to say any more. But you know what?
You've said enough. Yeah. You've been brilliant, John in Camden. Totally brilliant. Franco says, love the show. When are the people of this country going to wake up? We could learn a lot from the Yellow Jackets. Look at the banking system, the tax system, how the government waste our hard-earned tax cash and are unaccountable. I recently heard someone who was being investigated by the taxman only to be told, well, of course you need to pay your taxes. You're poor. Says Franco in Largs. What a very powerful point, Franco. Andrew is in Montreal in Canada. Our reach gets ever wider. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you very much. First of all, Mr. Galloway, most of the things you say, I agree with you. There's only one or two things that for which I would like to send you to the moon. But on the whole, 90% you're fantastic.
Thank you.
Now,
very kind. But
first of all,
I'd love to go to the moon as it happens, especially the dark side where China has just landed. The first people ever to do so.
Machine. No, listen, this idea of giving money, 14 million pounds to somebody who doesn't exist, no boats. I mean, if I know my little bit of a history, after the channel was created, there were ferry boats that are ready and yearning for business. So why did this government go ahead and give out money that it's completely waste? It's corruption.
Well, it's, as the last caller put it, it's either weapons-grade incompetence, nuclear weapons-grade incompetence, or it's malfeasance. And I'm writing to the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police this evening, asking her to investigate this.
Also, if I may say something, you talked about Russia and all that. Would you believe, I know you might call me crazy, Russia is not the enemy of the West.
I've opined on that so many times. I genuinely don't understand why we are effectively, virtually at war with Russia, another normal capitalist country.
And there's no reason for it. You know who's your enemy right now? Especially with that stupid EU there. There are three groups of people. First of all, maybe it's the people within your country that are somehow in the fifth column. But you have China, Islam, and Iran is your greatest enemy. And if you don't wake up, because you have a prime minister who's a Mrs. Neville Chamberlain, and nothing else.
Well, strong stuff. Andrew in Montreal, thanks for that. The Red Resistance says the Apple phone was basically a device derived via socialism. All the various parts of the phone were developed by US government research. Apple have packaged the same overpriced stuff for 20 years. Time's up. And David says, say what you read. The Gan Ve Gan. Well, you say tomato, I say tomato. Loft Nuthouse, that's my favourite name on Twitter. Vegan or vegan? I have no beef with them. Very good. Sonny says, I would have more sympathy for Apple if they made their phones in the USA. And Marie says, obviously I disagree. That's Marie McFarlane, who sent earlier the missive that said it had all gone pear-shaped since Steve Jobs. Apple had gone pear-shaped. You see what I did there? Obviously I disagree with David Wood. My best friend is a tech wizard. He assured me that Steve Jobs disapproved of the thinner design of the iPhone design proposed, which went ahead after he died. Remember the warped recalls, the mass broken screens? And Lord Cranium says, a sausage roll sans sausage? That's virgin on the ridiculous. Very good. Mary Mo says, and being vegan is not all about skinny, pale people as many believe. It actually gave me a whole new lease of life. Skin, hair, body weight, and even my mental health. This fella here is one of many vegan bodybuilders. And she gives a link to a fella that I'll probably not look up, just in case they're tracking me. Mal says, George, a lot of people who have devices made by Apple that are 3 or 4 years old report problems with their devices after downloading the latest operating software update, causing crashes and slowdowns and the like. Could be trying to make them obsolete, methinks. I'm trying to figure out, are Apple con men or very smart businessmen? I opt for the latter. Here's an SMS, anonymous, I think. The government pay $5 million to get rid of a drone that doesn't exist and $14 million for a boat that doesn't exist. Marie says, after Brexit, we'll have millions of public sector jobs, with workers spending wages to boost our economy and provide better lives. Why aren't we hearing more on this? Why is it big business we're supposed to worry about after Brexit? And Ali in Southwark says, every time a technology advancement, especially in telecommunication, is announced, it does not feel like an advancement, but more like a decline, a further decline for our safety and privacy. The Underdog says, George, surely with your contacts and friends, you could get someone on your show from Labour to come on to talk about this Ferry saga. Haven't you got a hotline to people like Chris Williamson or other? It is strange why no one from Labour is talking. Well, I was told at the top that Andy MacDonald was the man to speak on it because he's the transport spokesman. But he never showed up. Shadow. Transport spokesman. He's not the shadow spokesman, he's the spokesman. Tony X says, we used to call it BAD, B-A-D, broken as designed. Very clever, Tony. Jamie says, from Joe, phantom drones, phantom ferries. Are you really there, George? Because it's got me checking in the mirror to see if I'm here at all. Quite right, actually. Malfunctioning marionette. As if planned obsolescence wasn't wasteful enough, the constant rolling, increasingly expensive contracts are concerning, getting us into further debt whilst we struggle to pay to keep roofs over our heads, food and shelter. I mean, I'm insisting. It's not Las Vegas. It's vegan. That's my final take on the matter. But then I pronounce Ukraine as the Ukraine. So I do have a slightly eccentric way of accentuating certain words, but there's always method involved in the madness. Derek from Dundee says, this government has displayed a level of incompetence I've never seen in a government before. How can a transport secretary survive the amount of failures of Chris Grayling? And how can a prime minister survive losing her majority in an election she called and having next to no support for her deal in Parliament? And still MPs will claim to support her. The only reason I can think of is because they all put the interests of their own careers above that of the country. And they know Theresa May will keep giving them jobs. Thanks for that, Derek. Now, vegan or vegan, tomato or tomato, sausage or not sausage, there's no doubt that the culinary story of the week was Gregg's vegan sausage roll. I queued for one, and I told people I was going to put it on live stream, and thousands of people showed up and stayed there in a 10-minute queue as I spoke to the other customers coming and going, and nearly everyone was in for the vegan sausage roll. Now, I still don't know what it tastes like because they'd sold out by the time I got to the counter, and so had the next 2 Greggs that I went to. And as I said earlier, the Financial Times Northern correspondent did point out that in relation to my live streaming, you really can't buy publicity like this. Or publicity like this for Mr. Nice Pies, Tom Morgan, who owns, by all accounts, a fantastic pie shop. Tom, thanks for joining us.
Hello, George.
Now, first of all, is it vegan or vegan?
Well, it's up to you, mate. Well, whichever suits. It doesn't really matter. I say vegan myself.
I say vegan, you say vegan. Let's call the whole thing off. But, Tom, first of all, why are they calling it a sausage roll? Why are you calling it a sausage roll if you make them? Because there's no sausage in it.
No, not as such. But, if something is made in the shape of a sausage and it sort of resembles the flavour of the sausage, what's the harm in calling it a sausage?
No harm at all, mate. I'm merely reflecting the mania of commentators like Piers Morgan and others who went completely ballistic about the very idea.
Yeah, well...
Thereby generating queues in Gregg's and a sold-out product by 1 o'clock at lunchtime.
Yeah, well, great. Good on you, Piers.
Exactly. Gregg's didn't pay him, but he really ought to now send an invoice, I think. Tell us, how is the business going?
Fantastic, yeah, really good. We're actually going into our 8th year now, so we've been kind of ahead of the sort of the huge snowballing vegan thing for quite a while. Just doing all vegan pies, but it's been great. Best year ever for us.
Pies and sausage rolls, or just pies?
We generally do just pies, but we do the odd sort of special thing every now and then. We have done sausage roll.
I go into a vegan cafe in Camden Lock Market, and it's the first vegan I ever ate. And they do vegan that tastes like steak, vegan that tastes like Chinese food, vegan. I mean, you can really make the taste just as good as other food, can't you?
You can indeed, man. And you can make any sort of flavour that you want in the world, just without
having to kill an animal in a very brutal and inhuman way.
Well, exactly. Yeah, got it right there, man.
I mean, do you think that this is an idea whose time has come? I mean, a good friend of mine, Chris Williamson, the MP, he's been a vegan for 30 years. So he was really ahead of his time. And he said that this would eventually become the prevailing orthodoxy. Do you see it that way?
That's exactly how I see it. And I can't see how we can go any other way. I'm 36 years old, and just in my lifetime, the population's almost doubled in the world. And how we can sustain, killing animals for our food is just, I can't see how it can happen.
And that's just one of the angles, Tom. I read an amazing statistic in the newspaper this morning that 80% of animal feed in Britain has to be imported. So in terms of the planet, in terms of the waste of energy, in terms of the pollution of the planet, 80% of animal foodstuffs comes from abroad, has to be shipped in here in order to produce animals that we can then kill and eat.
And there's often an argument that comes back from the meat-eating population. They'll tell you that soy production is one of the worst things for deforestation. But most of soy production is made to feed animals, which we then eat. So you're eating basically second-hand energy.
So you could have just eaten the soy.
Well, exactly, and not having to produce as much, because the amount of animals live on the planet it's getting crazy.
Now, have you got a shop front, or are you online? How do people buy your nice pies?
You can get it if you take a look at our website. That's mrnicepie.co.uk.
Great name.
Cheers. We sell.
That's what it says on the pie.
We sell through a company called Yumbles, and we also sell through lots and lots of different shops around the UK. You can find a list of everywhere you can buy them on there. Plus, we do loads of different vegan events, different festivals every year. You can find the full list on our website.
And that's mrnicepies.com?
Mr. Nice Pie, without the S in the end.
Okay.
.co.uk.
.co.uk. I'll be doing that later. I promise you. Now, I'm in Neath on the 26th. I'm speaking in Neath. Have you got an outlet anywhere near there?
Well, that's pretty much exactly where we are, George.
Really? I promise you I didn't know that. And neither am I looking for a free pie. I never accept free pies. I want to bring people business, not take it away. So I'll be in on the day of the 26th of January when I'm speaking at the Gwyn Hall in the evening. I'll be in for a nice pie. That's a promise. I hope we meet then. Now, lastly, have you tried a Gregg's sausage roll, vegan sausage roll?
And it was very, very nice. I really enjoyed it.
Very good. I'm hoping to get one on Monday. They were sold out when I went.
Tomato ketchup.
Yeah? Okay,
yeah,
Tom. I'll take your recommendation. I'll redouble my efforts to get the vegan sausage roll on Monday, and I'll see you on the 26th of January. And if you want to get tickets for that gig, it's at the Gwyn Hall, GWYN. You can get it online. Thanks, Tom. Mr. Nice Pies indeed. He did seem very nice, and his pies sounded succulent, and I'm just a little bit hungry. Now, let me get some of the written material. Tony X says, there's nothing more delightful than a Neath Valley's accent. Do you know this, Tony? I was just thinking that myself. I was almost the Member of Parliament for the Rhondda Valley back in 1982. The by-election that never was over. 1983 was overtaken by the general election of that year. But if I had got that gig way back then, my children would be speaking with precisely that Neath Valley's accent, and very lovely it is too. Scott says, I continually hear how these Tory criminals are failing, incompetent, etc. They are neither. They set out to steal billions from the taxpayer and have been extremely competent in this. Arrests should be made, as this is blatant criminality, says Scott in Glasgow. Certainly prima facie a case for investigation, Scott. Let's hear from the legend that is Norma in Bristol.
Hello, George.
Happy New Year, Norma.
Thank you, and you. These two little subjects have got links, and it might sound a bit preachy,
links.
Really.
Was that a sausage gag?
Nah. No, it's not. I like Gregg's ordinary sausage rolls, but I would try a vegan.
Yeah, why not try it? Let's all give it a try.
I'm going to not really talk about that, but when it says about, do you call them scones or scones?
Scones, I call them.
Yeah, well...
What do you call them? Scones?
My mother used to call them scones.
Posh people in Scotland call them scones.
Yeah, I know. But my dad was posher than my mum, and he called them
town, by the way, Norma, the town spelt Scone is pronounced Scone.
All right.
There's a further conundrum. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Life does get complicated. No, there's just two little links I wanted to speak to you about. And about this sort of money and the powerful and all this money. But you know what? Sort of poor people, they want to feel proud of themselves, and they want to earn enough to be independent. And you get this bless you, my child mentality from the rich. And I hate it. I give to organisations that I choose, big charity ones if I choose need the money, but there's all this almost a feeling of power that the rich do pander to the poor, and I think the poorer people should feel proud of themselves and, be on top of things. That
That's a
Go on.
very, very fine point. I noticed that a family from the north of Ireland in Armagh won the Euro Millions jackpot, 113 million. And they're going to share it with 50 relatives and friends.
Oh, did they say that? Yeah.
Yeah. They're going to share it with 50 people,
Great, but
relatives and friends of theirs.
That is
God bless
really
them.
good.
God bless them. That is the right attitude.
There's only one other point, because I did want to get this in, which is a bit different, but it has got a link. You know all these smartphones? Well, I do have a computer, George, and I have an old mobile. But all this talk of technology, I might be old-fashioned, is not that great for character building at times. You get sort of ordinary people just want to nose into other people's business and take loads of selfies. And it's very boring, George. Just let people get a life. That's what I feel.
Well, Norma, as always, old-fashioned wisdom from the legend that is Norma in Bristol. Thank you for that call. You've still got time to call me, 0344 499 1000. Tommy has SMS'd in Oxfordshire. Where are we supposed to get 1,000 police officers to go to the north of Ireland in the event of a no-deal situation? There will be none left to investigate the great Ferry robbery. I could feel a movie coming on here. It would be kind of para-handy, the puffer, for those done certain age, from Scotland. Ali in Southwark says, John in Camden is fantastic and unsurprisingly a part of the University of the Airwaves. He really is very good, Ali. We need to swap places with the current government. I feel more competence and solutions coming from the mother of all talk shows. If I was a government front bench minister, I'd use the Moats as my instruction manual. Maybe we should set up the Moats Boats Company. That would maybe get millions out the... or the Moats Integrity Initiative. I'm working on that. Donald in Inverness is on the line
George.
now. Hi, Donald.
Good to speak to you.
And you, Happy New Year to you, my friend.
And a Happy New Year. Your programme is full of interesting things, George.
Thank you.
I mean...
A cornucopia of knowledge.
Exactly. I like your vocabulary. A bit of lateral thinking, George. I want to tie together your fat cats, Apple, and vegans, or...
Sausages, yeah.
Right.
And the guy, Mr. Cheese, Peter Cheese, who we couldn't get to come on the show. A man called Cheese, we couldn't get him on the show to talk about the fat cats squeezed in with the vegan sausages.
Yeah, but I mean, it's really... I think it's great, George, that you've... Fat Cat Friday, this is the first time I've ever heard of it. What I'm getting at is, just how interesting your topics are. Fat Cat Friday, the Phantom Ferry, nobody else has taken it on. No, what I want to do is tie the three things together, your Fat Cats, Apple and vegans, and end up with Apple shares.
Okay.
You'll remember from your Bible reading that Adam and Eve were vegetarians.
Indeed they were. Famously, yes.
It was only after Noah's global flood, when all the vegetarian vegetables were poured into the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, that man was permitted to eat meat. So maybe we're going back to the original.
Could be. Who
can say whether it's a sign that things are going to turn for the better?
Mm-hmm.
So Adam, as you know, they all think it was Adam's apple, but it doesn't say it's an apple, but he may have enjoyed an apple. But of course, Apple's stock is now struggling. Now, you'll notice.
I see where you're going here.
Yeah.
Very good, Donald.
Yeah. So, and I like the failing Grayling one. Incidentally, you'll remember that Grayling was the one that led Theresa May's leadership campaign.
Indeed.
So
that was his biggest crime of all.
Yeah, that's why he's hanging on with his fingernails. Yes. Probably because of that. Now, people like making money, and people don't like losing money. And you'll know how when there's something goes wrong in the stock market, the commentators will come on and they'll tell you it's all fallen because of this and because of that, because of the next thing. They'll tell you all these things after the event. And if they're such wiseacres, you would think they would tell us it before the event.
Quite so, yeah. None of them saw the 2008 crash coming.
Yeah. There were one or two. I remember at that time reading about stuff, people saying we're over leveraged and all that sort of stuff. But everyone just hoped that everything would turn out right. But the long and the short of it, George, is that people like making money and people don't like losing money. And it's quite simple that Apple's stock was way up at the top, and with most of these things are up at the top. Now, what happens when someone starts selling is, of course, people then start losing money. So they start, more and more people sell and sell and sell and sell and sell, and it keeps on going like that until confidence comes back into the market. So that these stocks are going down. And remember, people make money going up the way, and they also make money going down the way if they're smart enough to know how to do that. So it's in people's interest to drive things up, and it's then in their interest to drive things down, and so on and so forth. So I'm just throwing in that bit of pennyworth for people who can make use of it as they listen into your program.
It's fantastic, Donald. Lovely call and lovely to hear all these different accents, I must say, on the show. Donald, did you have a point of view on the vegan sausage roll?
Well, I'll tell you. Well, I was just, because the caller comes through, I didn't hear all that your last man said. I would love to eat one. I haven't had a chance yet.
Well, get down to Gregg's, but go early because
so I believe that you didn't
mine was sold out at 1 o'clock in the day.
You know, of course, that there's a branch of Christianity that is vegan. Probably, I don't know why they are, but they're very long-lived people. They're out in Salt Lake City and places like that. There's about 5 places around the world where people live to a great age. And one of these places is out there, and the whole place is set up vegan. But I think what's wrong is when people start making a religion out of it and start kind of saying you ought to be like this. And I noticed what you said. You said that, well, why not give it the taste of meat if you're
Yes. Apparently that's not politically correct amongst the vegan community. But I can see nothing wrong with that. You've certainly got a much greater chance of getting me to go vegan if it's actually going to taste as good and taste like that which I like eating now. It's kind of obvious. I'm not sure. There is a bit of, as Donald said, a bit of the religiosity, evangelical approach of some vegans that does put people off. If you look into the eyes of any animal, you can see they have a soul. They feel pain, and we can surely no longer justify the cruelty when excellent alternatives are so readily available. Well done to Greggs. Go veggie, George. From Flower Power. Thank you, Flower Power. Ali says, the way things are going, this Gregg's vegan sausage will be named after you. Galloway Hotel. Viva Las Vegan. Brilliant. Totally brilliant. Let's hear from Stephen in Welwyn Garden City. Stephen, welcome.
Hi, George. We've
Hi.
spoken a few times because I know you like the sound of my town.
I do. I was just going to say, it's one of the loveliest names of any place in the whole country. Welwyn Garden City. I've never been there, but it conjures up visions of Elysian fields. Is it like that? Is it pretty?
It's a bit like that. You should come up and do one of your shows. I'll post in details of a couple of venues that you could do.
Okay, please do that. Please do that.
One of your films, even. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Happy New Year, by the way.
And to you, Stephen. Yes, good New Year to you.
So I was going to say, talk about the lack of passion from the opposition. I heard Andy McDonald the other day. I think he was on this station, and Mike Graham was able to get hold of him. Lucky Mark.
How interesting.
It was about the increase in the train fares, and I must say, it was really a monotone accent. I mean, he made Andy Burnham sound like a firebrand, and Andy Burnham isn't exactly a
Well, you see, it's just not good enough, Stephen. It's just not good enough that in that vital portfolio, against such a weak opponent in failing Grayling, that Labour is fielding a speak-your-weight machine who doesn't even show up for what could have been a big debate here this evening on this subject. It's just not good enough.
Well, exactly. I mean, wouldn't you think an opposition that really thinks that the government could be on the ropes? I mean, let's face it, this government is going from bad to worse. An opposition would sort of bite your hand off to be on the air, have the opportunity
Yep.
to its message, and yet, they can't find a spokesperson, or that no one can be found. It's always an excuse, isn't it? Really.
I was told. Let me tell you the whole story. I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to. I wanted to speak to Tom Watson, and I was told, why Tom Watson? And I said, because he's been speaking out about it, and quite well. And I was told, Andy MacDonald is the spokesman.
Oh dear.
And so we went to Andy MacDonald. Notwithstanding, I'd heard that he was a speak your weight machine. We went to him. And he hasn't showed up for the show. He hasn't got back to us. It's just not good enough. I'm really angry about it. And I told the people at the top I'm very angry about it.
Well, and actually, George, I mean, he's from the north of England. He's got that sort of accent. I'm not sure exactly whereabouts, but he had that monotone as if he's reading from a card, if you know what I mean. Like most politicians, like yourself, I mean, you don't need a script. I mean, anyone that tuned in by accident and heard you knows that it's coming from your heart. I mean, and I'm not just being flattery to you.
No, it's a fact. I've never in my life had a script.
No, and it was just, I mean, what Andy MacDonald said about the train increases, the fare increases, I mean, a boy or girl in the street would know that. It was like, well, it's not a good thing to charge 3% more. Travellers don't like it. And it was very wishy-washy like that. There was no fire in the belly, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, Corbyn needs to get himself a new transport spokesman. Let me make that clear from this platform this evening. Now, Stephen, the Great Ferry Robbery, as my film might be called, although if I make it, it'll have to be a comedy, I think. Is it weapons grade incompetence in your view, or is it something much worse than that?
Well, I think it could be worse than that. I mean, as some of your callers earlier have said, if it was someone like myself, an average Joe in the street.
Yeah, you'd have been nicked by now, wouldn't you?
Would there be a knock at the door? I mean, if I was pretending
if you had £66 in the bank and a credit worthiness of £5,000, you'd taken your terms and conditions from a takeaway company's menu, and you applied to your council for £14 million for a business, and they gave it to you. Both of you would be in the nick.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, non-existent offices, it's through a lawyer's firm. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
No employees, no office, 66 quid in the bank, just been given £14 million unrefundable of government money. Your money, my money.
It's unbelievable, really. I mean,
the more I speak about it, the more unbelievable it is. The more unbelievable it is that this is not the biggest issue on the news at the moment.
And that's why McDonald's should be banging on your door saying, please, can I come on?
Exactly. Stephen, a pleasure to talk to you, and I promise I'll come to Welwyn Garden City if you give me some venues, because I've always loved the name. Grayson is in Caterham. Welcome, Grayson.
Happy New Year, George.
Happy New Year, my friend.
A couple of things. Very quickly on vegan, and whatever. It rather reminds me of what you described the characters in Star Trek, when you have an argument. But
yes, exactly.
I'm going with vegan.
They were Vulcans, weren't they?
Yes, they were.
A Vulcan sausage roll. That sounds like something we could market.
It does. I just wanted to comment a little bit about your Fat Cat Friday,
yes,
which you had earlier on, and it strikes me two things. One, I think, which you rightly focused on, which was the kind of this globalization. Everybody claiming that CEOs we're operating in the world market for CEOs like it's the Premier League, and. I remember my son said to me only the other day, we're commenting about Mark Carney stopping on a bit longer as Bank of England, but Dad,
what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, possibly go wrong, but Dad, can't we find a British guy who could be
run the Bank of England?
Yes, exactly, and I agree with him. But the other major thing is that in the 70s, I suppose the archetypal British fat cat was, somebody like the Ledbetters in The Good Life. They had a nice-ish house. They drove a Jag and maybe went to the golf club. But, since the financialization of the economy, I mean, it's that has driven CEO pay. That these fantastic sums, these fantastic bonuses being made in the financial sector, in insurance, in real estate. And that is what has driven pay levels so high. And then, of course, everybody else wants to join in on the game, And
exactly. I mean, I gave a football analogy earlier, Grayson. If Alexis Sanchez is, as he is when he plays, being paid £480,000 a week, if I am Rashford, if I am Pogba even, I'm saying to the manager, if you want me to sign another contract, you're going to have to pay me the same as you're paying Alexis Sanchez, or I'm out of here. That's exactly what's happening here.
Yeah.
And when you hear how circular it is, as the Economist lady pointed out, that these people are all sitting on other boards of other companies, so they have a vested interest in voting to put executive pay up in these other companies, because eventually their contract will be up for renegotiation.
Yeah.
And they will have established a floor.
Absolutely. And it strikes me that one of the things that the Labour government tried to put in, which was a good idea, but it just hasn't really worked that effectively, was the Miners Committee recommendations on corporate governance, which, had a bit of an impact, as Vicky Price was saying, but not that much of an impact overall. People still get paid absurd amounts of money.
They do indeed. They do. Thank you, Grayson, for a wonderful call and for your New Year wishes. I should have wished you all a Happy New Year, actually, at the beginning of the show. It's just that I've been working since January the 1st. It no longer feels like New Year to me. Mal says, do you remember in 2017 that American supermarket, Trader Joe's, claimed to have invented the sausage roll, but called it the puff dog? They thought that was a stroke of genius. I don't actually. I thought Trader Joe's was an Italian restaurant somewhere, or a pizza or something. Tony X says, just for vegan and meat-eating clarity, the word sausage means seasoned with salt and refers to a food made of ground meat or meat substitute and seasoning. Now, Tony X is an exceptional member of this university community, but he's not unique. The quality of calls, texts, emails, tweets that come into the mother of all talk shows is definitely record-breaking, which is why we'll never get any awards. Mary Mo says, that's nonsense, George. Don't believe in all you hear. Many vegans have switched from a meat-based life. Do enjoy the meat-tasting vegan food. I do, and many others. There are some that don't like it, but we are all different. Yeah, quite, Mary Mo. So it wasn't nonsense. I said some vegans have a certain religiosity about their choice, a certain evangelicalism about their choice that puts some people off. That's all I'm saying. Well, it's been marvellous for me. I hope it was for you. Don't forget, I'm in Neath on the 26th of January, and I will be visiting that lovely, nice pie shop. And the next night, I'm in Birmingham at the Old Rep Theatre. You can get tickets for both from the websites of both venues, the Gwyn Hall in Neath and the Old Rep Theatre in Birmingham. Well, as I say, it's been marvellous for me, and if it was for you, come back next week at the same time, same place, for the next edition of the Mother of All Talk Shows.